Hello everybody and welcome to this episode of Construction Careers Week 2017. Today we are talking to Debbie Ward from Clugston Construction. Debbie will introduce herself in a moment, but she has a really interesting specialist field around the circular economy, which could be a very interesting way of looking at construction careers for those of you who maybe think that construction is all about grubby building sites. Hello Debbie, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Catherine.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to get involved in the circular economy?
Yes, so my role at Clugston is Business Development Manager, which basically involves bringing business into Clugston and creating new relationships and maintaining relationships with potential clients and consultants. So maybe not what you'd associate with what the circular economy is about, but I've long had an interest in all things sustainability and really doing right by the environment. I think it's really important to look at the bigger picture of what we're doing and why we're doing things, and understanding what impact that's having on the environment. And a couple of years ago I started reading more about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Ellen MacArthur is a very interesting lady. She solo circumnavigated the world in a small yacht boat, and her story around how she came into the circular economy is very interesting, and all around finite resources, really. A very poignant moment where she really reflected on the fact that the planet only has so many resources, and as a population we're using them up far too fast, and finite resources like fossil fuels and metals we need to be far more careful with, because otherwise future generations are going to be having a lot of difficulty to be able to live the lifestyle we've been able to live.
And that's really important for construction, isn't it? As such a massive user of those kind of minerals and resources and natural supplies, it's something that we can unintentionally do a lot of damage with in the sector.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the statistics of not only how much of those materials the construction industry uses, but also how much waste the construction industry generates, and if we were a lot more careful in the way we were designing buildings and designing infrastructure at having better use of materials and designing more robustly and for longer life, but also when a building does get to the end of its life, we shouldn't be demolishing it, we should be deconstructing it or disassembling it and looking at the component parts of that building and thinking, well, how can these component parts be used again? You know, the automotive and aerospace industries are often way ahead of other sectors for looking at how to do things more effectively. And yeah, in the car industry, they are looking a lot more, particularly at materials like aluminium. Caterpillar Remanufacturing has been remanufacturing their engine cores since the 1970s, and they design their engine cores to be remanufactured. And that's what we need to be looking at for our buildings. You know, if an automotive manufacturer can do it successfully, there's no reason why in the longer term construction can't follow suit.
And I know that this is something that you talk about with other people in the sector. Is this something that Clugston are keen for you to introduce into them as an organisation, or is this something that they are already sort of ahead of the curve with themselves?
I think Clugston are probably fairly middle of the pack. We are ISO 14001 accredited, which is the Environmental Management System accreditation. So we're very aware as a business of our obligations and what we should be doing to ensure we don't pollute water courses, to make sure we waste as little as possible on site, to separate our waste, that it's properly dealt with further down the line. But I think circular economy takes that up another notch. And by them sponsoring me to do this qualification, I'm studying a postgraduate certificate in innovation, enterprise and the circular economy at the moment. As I say, Clugston have sponsored me to do that, and I think one of the reasons is because they're genuinely interested in the benefits to them as a business and to the industry of implementing the circular economy, and that's something I've just started working with our business improvement manager on.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to get started. So I know you have a presentation to talk us through today. Some schools will be watching this live, some will be watching it pre-recorded. If you have questions and comments at the end, please do add them to our Facebook page, and we'll make sure that we can get those answered as quickly as possible for you, because I think this is an interesting subject that ties into a lot of the curricula. Okay, Debbie, over to you.
Thank you. Well, really, this presentation is really just to provide a brief overview of the circular economy to hopefully raise people's interest and leave students wanting to find out more about what the circular economy is, how they can get involved, and what the business benefits are. Because really, I think when you're trying to introduce a new concept to a business, as much as businesses are interested in doing the right thing socially, environmentally, it also has to be economically profitable. So I think a question that a lot of businesses and individuals might ask in the first instance is, okay, the circular economy, I've not heard of that. What's in it for me? And I think that really depends on what hat you're wearing. We could look at a number of different drivers as to why a business or an individual might look at going circular, and I'm going to focus on the business benefits to start with. The opportunities for business of going circular are significant. For example, the Accenture Waste to Wealth report states that adopting the circular economy would create $4.5 trillion of additional economic output by 2030. And there are a number of business models on this slide which Accenture summarises in their report. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation and McKinsey estimate that there will be an investment of 117 billion euros by 2025 in a circular built environment. The built environment is currently being disrupted strongly in sharing of offices and residential space, and net zero energy buildings are scaling fast. There are also emerging and potentially disruptive trends around 3D printing of the building exterior and more modular building techniques. If scaled up sufficiently by attracting required investment, these trends would shift value from the construction process and energy suppliers to real estate managers who excel at getting best value from existing buildings and deep retrofit. Cities going circular include Amsterdam, Copenhagen, New York, Vancouver, and London. The Mayor of London and Greater London Authority are working with London Waste and Recycling Board to develop a route map for London's transition to the circular economy, looking at opportunities for London to reuse, remanufacture and redistribute materials, create new jobs, and reviewing the way economic performance is measured with a focus on resource efficiency. Management of building materials within high-value closed loops for efficient disassembly techniques, materials passports, innovative business models, and reverse logistics ecosystems can save over £200 million annually. And in fact, London has, in June this year, launched its circular route map. There are a number of definitions of the circular economy, but all advocates are in agreement that today's predominantly linear take, make, dispose economic model which relies on large quantities of cheap, easily accessible materials and energy is reaching its physical limits. What the circular economy is not is another sustainability fad, nor is it waste management rebranded. And it's much more than improved recycling, not least because retaining materials at their highest value is a fundamental part of the model. Currently, we are recycling a proportion of our waste, but the circular economy model creates virtually no waste. It valorizes waste, redefining it as a potential raw material. The circular model is a viable alternative to the linear one, with a growing number of examples where organisations are successfully grasping the opportunities going circular can bring. This is a slightly more complicated diagram that illustrates biological and technical material flows to retain highest levels of value. This is based on the cradle-to-cradle design protocol, and it's a graphic that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation use a lot in their CE material. By adopting circular economy business models, the focus will shift to maintaining material productivity over the life cycle of the development, reducing losses of non-renewable materials. And again, a slightly complicated diagram, but this does demonstrate within the construction industry a more tangible diagram of how the circular economy could work. This is an example where Circle Economy have worked with the City of Amsterdam to produce a supply chain model. In an ideal circular construction chain, the design way that materials will have the longest possible lifespan through reuse or repurposing. A concept called materials passports is a key enabler to stimulate this. It increases transparency to develop a business case and enables reallocation of materials, often following deconstruction or disassembly. And it also facilitates the concept of buildings as material banks, where you might think of putting your money in a piggy bank. That bank saves your money for you to spend it at a future time. If you have a building as materials bank, the materials that are used to build that building today, when that building is deconstructed in 20 years' time, you've got materials that can still be used at the prices that you would have paid in future, is different from what the prices that you paid when the building was put up. The passports improve the availability of product information, not only keeping track of building materials, but also their potential impact on health. Shared ownership, sharing platforms, and the 24-hour economy are facilitating better use of buildings through peer-to-peer renting, office sharing, and multi-purposing buildings. In addition to the drivers of resource scarcity and price volatility, the upcoming millennial generation are demanding more sharing and performance-based models. The sharing economy is not just one that matches the aspirations of millennials to be uber flexible and have limited ties. It's also one that addresses their lack of affordability regarding durable goods and higher investment purchases such as cars and houses. So on to some examples of projects demonstrating circular economy principles. This building is Segrove 9 Cambridge Avenue, which was deconstructed and moved about a mile away. It delivered 25% savings in costs and 56% lower embodied carbon at practical completion compared with a comparative new build. And bear in mind, this building hadn't actually been designed to deconstruct. So you've still got those savings in costs and lower embodied carbon from the building that had been designed as buildings normally are designed and not designed for disassembly. Another case study is Park 2020 in the Netherlands, which has been successfully developed with 4 underlying cradle-to-cradle principles: design for disassembly, products for services, materials banking, and productivity and health. An example of a product as a service is Philips, which now offers a pay-per-lux service rather than buying lights as products. So you're basically paying for the lighting as a service, and by doing that and buying that as a package, you're buying the installation, the maintenance, and the eventual removal to take back unwanted fittings for reuse, repair, or recycling. The circular building by Arup and Royal BAM consists of an array of reused materials and new products which have circularity designed into their physical principles. Implementing circular economy principles in construction is gaining momentum, still at an early stage. By testing what is possible now, the circular building highlights the challenges and opportunities ahead. There's lots of great examples here, such as the structural steel from ArcelorMittal, and a host of innovative products in the skin, including insulation which can be composted at the end of its first use in the building. Another example of planning for reuse is at Prologis, where they're designing for steel reuse, either for their own purposes or for purchase and use by third parties. Another is the eco-overhaul of the UK Green Building Council's office, an example of so-called urban mining, the concept of reusing valuable materials rather than sending them off to landfill. Here, 98% of the original fixtures were reused or repurposed. Urban mining and deep retrofits are becoming increasingly viable options, delivering a positive return in today's market, while also defending the existing value of the building. It's estimated that office buildings are only used up to 65% of their capacity. Liquid Space and others are offering networks to connect growing teams and professionals looking for space directly with space providers, real estate professionals, and service providers. The Liquid Space online tools simplify the discovery and transaction of office space, and their innovative legal framework eliminates the costs and complexities of traditional leasing. So at this stage, many businesses that I speak to about the circular economy are still slightly dubious because they're saying, that's okay, I understand, but how are we going to get funding to do these schemes? Well, parameters traditionally used for performing due diligence on real estate assets already consider relevant issues, such as quality of the construction, residual value, aesthetics of an asset, increased comfort for users, and potential increased productivity for workers. That said, many of the somewhat conservative financial sector may not yet be ready for the additional step change required for a circular approach. However, a number of institutions are taking up the mantle, such as ING, ABN AMRO, Rabobank, and Intesa Sanpaolo. So going back to the hat, and I think it's an important element of the circular economy that whilst you do have to look at the bottom line as a business, and that's what I've focused on in a lot of the slides of this presentation, it's also important to look at the broader family and citizen perspectives. There are a number of reports and statistics that very clearly show that the current status quo cannot be maintained. The numbers are not comfortable reading and demonstrate that our consumption patterns are fast outstripping what our planet is able to provide. So, whether as students listening to this, you think the economic opportunity is the big reason to pursue the circular economy, or whether improving social capital or leaving the planet in a better state for your generation and generations to come is the reason for pursuing this, a substantial change in approach will be made. The circular economy model is not only less environmentally damaging, but economically more efficient. The circular economy can help businesses save on raw material and waste management costs, improve competitiveness, reduce operating costs, and increase supply chain and resource security, resulting in substantial financial benefits. The convergence of new technologies in communication, energy, and transport are already disrupting linear economy models, driving the change to a circular economy. I really hope that this has all sounded interesting to you and that you will explore further how going circular can benefit you as individuals, your schools, and businesses that you may work for in the future. This is just a few of the many reports that there are about the circular economy. The BSI has just published an executive briefing, BS 8001, earlier on this year, to sit alongside their other accreditations, ISO 14001, which I mentioned earlier. It's not yet an accreditation, it's just a set of guidelines, but that's a demonstration of how far forward the circular economy ethos is moving into the business world. And these are some of the companies that are already embracing the circular economy. Thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Debbie. That was just really exciting to hear. And I think hopefully there are students looking at this slide now with all of those employers on there and recognizing that this is something that they could be learning more about and taking into their future in order to make sure that the planet has a future beyond that. There were a number of concepts in there that you talked about that are quite specific to construction and terms and things, but I think what I'd like to say to teachers and to students out there is that some of these concepts will be part of the curriculum subjects that you're already learning around science subjects, around economics and maths, around geography. And I think that this is maybe something that we can add more content to over this year of schools engagement, if this is something that's of interest. Debbie, this must be so interesting for you to be involved in. You must learn things every day, every time you're going to lectures.
Yeah, I mean, the depth of information I didn't realise we would be going into, because it's something that comes across a lot is the word system, which is really looking at the bigger picture, always trying to stand back and look at the bigger picture. Often we focus on becoming more efficient, make this product more efficient, make this process more efficient. It's very detailed, it's stripping small things out and another step of stripping small things out, when sometimes becoming more and more efficient actually ends up creating a process that doesn't actually really work particularly well, or a product that ends up not working particularly well, when if you stood back and took a look at the whole system in itself, you might actually put that product to one side and put a completely new product in its place as part of that system to make it all work better. And I think that there are bits of looking at individual parts, but we really need, from a circular economy perspective, to make the whole system work better. And something that I come across a lot in what I'm learning is collaboration and bringing the circular economy into the construction industry, into any industry. It's not any one business, it's how that business is working within its supply chain, how that business is impacting in the local community around it. It's all about that bigger picture. And yeah, I'm talking to anybody, both business-wise and family-wise, that will listen to me to try and get them interested in this subject, because I'm just so passionate and believe so strongly about this being a direction that we have to move in.
Absolutely, and I think hopefully the students and the teachers who are listening to this now know that this is something that actually resonates with them and their vision of the future. And some of the problems that have been created in the world are a true reflection of some of those poor decision-making processes that you were talking about before. And if we're going to fix those problems, we can't just carry on doing the same things slightly better. We're actually going to have to start thinking about the process as a whole different system, come at it from a different angle.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that you wanted to pass on to young people or to students today?
I think really in view of the it being a construction week, and that's why we're doing this really, and pulling it to property and construction specifically, I think it's another example of the breadth of the construction industry and the breadth of roles and different levels of interest within that. You know, I mean, people may not think about the marketing and business development part of construction, which is obviously where my role day to day is, but then looking at that environmental, sustainability, circular economy side that slices through the whole sector and many other sectors as well, I think it's just really important not to put the construction industry in a trades box, because whilst plumbing, carpentry, bricklaying is hugely important, there's massive other parts of the sector as well that can take you in, you know, a number of other different directions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much again for your time, Debbie. Anyone listening to this, either during the broadcast or afterwards, if you have questions and comments, please do add them, and we'll try and pick those up regularly and hopefully build on some of this message over the rest of the school year. Thank you again, Debbie, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.